Our next presentation now is Professor Áine Ní Gháin, Professor of Forestry at UCD's School of Agriculture and Food Science.
Hi everybody. I'd just like to begin by thanking the Foundation, the RDS Foundation, for asking me to speak here today on the topic of forest recreation in Ireland. My brief presentation is really informed from the results of the FOREC project, a project funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, in which myself, Mary Ryan from Teagasc and Cahill O'Donoghue from the University of Galway were partners. And I need to note that my master's student, Martin Murphy, is responsible for a lot of the research results I'm going to present. So I just wanted to kind of make the important point that forest recreation is a very important ecosystem service of forests. And that importance is clearly recognised in the new EU forest strategy, where it states that recreational functions of the forest contribute to citizens' health, physical and mental health. And indeed, in our own Irish forest strategy, it is stated that Ireland has a magnificent forest recreation resource and there are opportunities for growth there. And what's been witnessed, not just in Ireland but across the world, is that demand for forest recreation is increasing as populations become increasingly urbanised. So in the context of Ireland, who provides the opportunities for forest recreation? Well, the forest estate, the public forest estate, is primarily managed by Cahill, and also there's some forest sites within the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So Cahill, as you see there on that slide, has an estimated 260 forest recreation sites. On those sites, there's an open forest policy in the sense that it's open for walkers. Other recreationists will have to apply for permits. And it is Cahill's stated aim that they want to increase the number of such sites to 500. The private estate, which now is the majority of the forest area in Ireland, is owned by private owners. Per se, there's no open forest policy there. If an owner has got a forest road grant, access to that road is available to the public. It's part of the conditions of getting the grant. Otherwise, the remainder of the forest is more than likely not open to the public. There are lots of interesting examples, and I'm sure we'll hear about them later on in the awards, of community forests, be they on private or public land, where such access is provided. And what we see from looking at any studies or figures that we have in relation to visitors to forests in Ireland is that they've increased substantially. If we look at one of the earliest figures from 1993, there was an estimated, I think, 1.4 million visitors annually to forests in Ireland. The most recent one I have puts that at, I think I'm looking at it here, 29 million annual visits. And what we noticed during the pandemic was that demand for such access or visit to forest sites increased. And you can see there, I think I clipped there from one of the Cahill websites where some of their most popular recreational forests, the number of visits doubled or indeed tripled during the pandemic. And actually an interesting element of that is that information is available now because Cahill does engage in visitor counts. So we have good data, which is what we need for any scientific research. So just a little bit on the FOREC study, which involved visitors to forests during the pandemic, 8 forests all over the country being surveyed. And I've just highlighted some of the findings, and a lot of these have been replicated in other studies undertaken internationally during and since the pandemic. And what we find is, yes, that the number of visits to forests did increase. But in fact, in this case, we found it wasn't that a lot of people who'd never been to the forest before started visiting during the pandemic. It was people who'd already visited, increased their frequency of visits. Something maybe to consider from a social justice point of view, I suppose, is that most visitors to forests, not just in Ireland but elsewhere in the world, tend to be the more affluent, tend to have higher education levels than the population at large, and that was evidenced again in this piece of research. What we found was that those we surveyed had strong intentions to continue increasing their level of visits. So that demand we anticipate is going to continue to increase. It was particularly certain groups that visited more, those in the health, education and office sector that were visiting more often. Older people, I suppose, not surprisingly, visited less during the pandemic. People tend not to travel too far. The distance travelled to the forest for recreation was quite limited, and people tended to travel by car. Their preference for the type of forest they want to recreate in, based on a little bit of an additional question we had in the questionnaire, was close to home forests with recreational facilities and a preference for broadleaf forests. So I suppose a question that led to is, can or will the forest sector respond, the forest recreation sector respond to this increase in demand? So we looked at whether forest recreation was a priority for a range of stakeholders involved in both the forest and the wider outdoor recreation sector. We wanted to find out whether there were problems or barriers to private forest owners engaging in supplying forest recreation opportunities, and if there were such barriers, how they might be overcome. And to do that, we interviewed a range of stakeholders from the forestry sector, from rural recreation officers to people from Sports Ireland and Horse Sport Ireland. And what all those people said to us was that they really felt forest recreation was very important, but that their own organisations didn't have the financial or the human resource capacity to make it more significant for their organisations. And we also asked them, what do you think is stopping private enterprises or private forest owners engaging in supplying more recreation opportunities to the public? And I've just listed a few of them there. The whole issue about insurance and indemnification for the owners of such forests if the public access them, and how legislation might need to change to I suppose, protect the forest owner and make it clearer to the visitor what their duties and responsibilities are when they come onto private land. And in the broader sense, there needs to be, I suppose, more financial incentive for owners to engage in such activities, more research and extension, more marketing promotion of the existing examples that are there. And one thing that was said is if people do get involved in this, owners, that they need some sort of point of contact to address issues or get more information about the situation. And then finally, I suppose something that's important, the average size of private forest in Ireland is 8 hectares, and there was questions raised as to what challenges that might pose for forest recreation. So that's really all I wanted to say about that key ecosystem service, and thank you for listening.